Hello everybody and good morning. A lot of pressure, first one up, I'll tell you what. Now just thank you very much, Robbie, for the lovely introduction. I'm going to repeat some of it again now. My name is Liagh Whelehan and I'm from a dry stock farm in North Wexford. I studied science and then business at university, but was never too far from agriculture, and in particular my love of growing. So currently I'm working on a bedding and a pot plant nursery comprising of 8 acres of Dutch glass houses and supplying into independent garden centres and retail chains across Ireland. This morning, I'll be talking about ways that we can improve the production efficiency and output of controlled environment crop production in particular. This is with an emphasis on practices that increase the economic and the environmental sustainability of these enterprises, and we'll be drawing on 2 main case studies from my Nuffield travel in 2023. So through my research, I was fortunate enough to talk to growers and technical experts from many different countries and production systems. Briefly, I'm going to run through some of the most pertinent areas discussed in these conversations in relation to the topic of optimizing production in controlled environment agriculture, or CEA. California, where I saw firsthand the importance of building climate resilience through heat-tolerant breeding, increased flexibility of production approach, and resource use optimization through targeted irrigation to minimize inputs and decrease chemical dependency, and when the need for hard conversations and decisions around resource allocations have to happen, in particular around water and its limited availability in some of these systems. Northern Australia, where examples of tropical fruit production brought issues such as biosecurity, climate change, and disease control to the fore. From banana disease research stations to coffee plant propagation and high-value shade house vanilla production, valuable lessons can be learned on the importance of maximising return for producers through crop selection and the value of long-term investments in biosecurity. Japan, where the production year-round of high-quality leafy greens and veg is the norm, with 38% being locally grown. Their use of multi-layered tunnel structures are a relatively cost-effective method of increasing crop diversity, maximising space usage across multiple temperature regimes. The result, small areas with very high outputs of a very large range of crops. Britain, where extensive glasshouse production illustrated the value of straightforward, well-tended data management processes and their ability to dramatically improve the efficiency in multi-crop systems. And last but by no means least, the Netherlands, whose embrace of technological innovations is pushing space efficiency and ruthless crop selection, leading high-output CEA systems across Europe. Some examples will be discussed in a little bit more detail in the coming slides. But first, a bit on globalisation. Due to warmer climates and overall production costs, a large volume of plants and cut flowers are entering the European and more specifically the Irish markets from outside the EU. This poses considerable biosecurity risks, but also opportunities for the industry to substitute a portion of these imports with domestically grown alternatives. It's always worth acknowledging that globalisation has and continues to play a key role in horticultural development. And though without it we'd be without fire blight, we'd also be without the potato. Teagasc currently lists the horticultural industry's culminated output at about 477 million farm gate value. Controlled environment production is a dynamic and progressive subsection of this, with the potential to contribute an awful lot more. Improving the efficiency and the sustainability of these high-output CEA systems has the capacity to benefit both food and ornamental production in volume output and the increased marketability of these products. Looking abroad, there's some challenges that we're all sharing, different situations but very pertinent learnings to us here in Ireland as well. It's worth briefly discussing some of these big issues currently facing our sector in particular. The peat crisis. What are we going to grow in going forward, and where are we going to get it from? The rising cost of inputs and overall increasing production costs. Consumer awareness and their general perception of this industry. Sustainability initiatives and the increasing regulatory curtailment of pesticide use. And climate change and dealing with increased weather unpredictability, even in these controlled environments. Our current production environment in general is becoming more challenging, not less. Despite this, there's still a really strong drive within the industry to improve how we're doing things, to grow the sector, to increase our output of high-quality products sustainably and at realistic price points for the end consumer. This is what I'll be discussing more of today. Crop selection is arguably one of the most important decisions. What can we grow and who's going to buy it? The Californian climate is far warmer and drier than what we're experiencing here in our temperate zones. However, weather patterns are changing and we are seeing the impact of this on the ground. Crop breeding is a very slow game, and looking to crops that are being successfully cultivated in climates that represent where we may be in the future can help us be prepared for these changes. Reducing temperatures and increasing irrigation to grow crops that have an ideal temperature range of, say, between 12 and 18 degrees in a climate that's 26 or 28 degrees is far more costly than growing a cultivar or a crop that has been bred to be more heat tolerant and drought resistant. These small alterations in cultivation requirements can save dramatically on producer inputs and reduce crop failures and wastage volumes. Similarly, breeding for shorter program times on fast turnover crops and earlier flowering times on ornamentals all have the capacity to increase our annual crop turnovers while providing the end consumer with the quality and colourful end product that they're expecting. Climate resilience through breeding is critical, but so too are other production metrics such as targeted irrigation. Both too little and too much can have an equally detrimental effect on crop health. When delivered precisely, it works to minimise fungal disease risk, the occurrence of pest attacks, regulate plant growth, reduce water consumption, and the need for chemical interventions. For example, last season, California saw firstly too much rainfall and the resulting rush of soft lush growth and fungal disease, followed by too little, and the challenging conversations that this posed around resource allocations. From both a policy and an infrastructure perspective, these are conversations that we're going to have more of in the context of climate mitigation and future-proofing our industries in the future. In the bottom photo, you can see an image of a sign that states, "Is growing food wasting water?" It's growing food wasting water, apologies. This is part of a series of posters that I saw down along the east coast of the States, introducing this now political and very controversial issue over there around irrigation and water allocation. I was lucky enough to also spend a number of days on two of the largest young plant production facilities in the Netherlands, talking to growers and learning about their approaches to producing under glass in intensive systems. Both companies are supplying the same markets, domestic and export, with a similarly diverse range of high-quality seed and cutting raised plants, yet with vastly different cultivation approaches and methodologies. This illustrated me the importance of defining your system and your approach. Variations in infrastructure and unique constraints didn't prevent the application of general growing principles being applied very precisely. For example, the use of increased feed concentrations to control plant growth in one facility versus their neighbours' reliance on chemical plant growth regulator applications. High labour costs for the batch movement of plants through optimal environmental zones versus their neighbours' calculated acceptance of losses for overall efficiency gain and lower labour usage. Similar variations in approaches were seen in their trade-offs between energy and efficiency, most pertinent in the context of decisions around heating and artificially lighting crops, all again to reduce those crop programmes. Accurate and ever-shortening crop programming also allows the output from these facilities to be maximised by minimising the downtime on empty space on the nursery and keeping crop turnover high. Across Dutch glasshouse production, the last number of years has also seen a large increase in the uptake of integrated pest management. This is as a result of multiple factors, including the regulatory curtailment of chemical usage, a rising awareness of human health implications, and an increased concern over negative impacts on the environment. The result is a surge in uptake in non-chemical control measures for pests and diseases, driving down the prices of these expensive little biologicals who, don't forget, work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have a lot to learn from our Dutch counterparts on getting the most out of our integrated pest management programmes. Now, though the primary focus of this work was on approaches to sustainably improving output at grower level, it's well worth briefly mentioning the pivotal roles retailers and end consumers have to play in this process. Retailers need to look back along their supply chains in terms of sustainability. Meeting minimum compliance standards and emphasising green marketing is not sufficient. Without economic support, producers face a huge challenge in implementing the necessary changes to improve the environmental sustainability of growing. The end consumer also has a role to play with regards to informed purchasing choices.
Perhaps a greater emphasis needs to be placed on educating consumers around the economic costs of producing environmentally sustainable products. Finally, my recommendations fall under two broad categories. What can we as producers do to improve the efficiency of our output? And what can we do as part of a bigger picture approach to improve the sustainability of our industry? But firstly, for our own production. A realistic evaluation of your system is key in identifying where there's room for growth and development, or alternatively, where ruthlessness around systems or crops that are no longer serving their purpose is required. Increased flexibility to build resilience. This is very much to the fore today, where increasingly extreme weather patterns are pushing both ends of the environmental spectrum. Unpredictable rainfalls, increased energy usage to mitigate temperature drops, crop losses due to heat stress. Production environments are becoming more challenging, and climate mitigation measures need to be considered more seriously today in order to optimise performance for tomorrow. For example, increased water storage capacities, more sophisticated environmental control systems, the use of semi-permanent covered structures, or incorporating partial disassembly into permanent structures for increased airflow, crop selection, breeding. Re-evaluating some of these established growing practices and the embrace of alternative disease and pest control practices will be even more pertinent going forward. A changing regulatory environment, evolving consumer demands, and growing environmental and health concerns are all contributing in the need to drive these changes forward. The precision use of costly inputs also needs to be maximised in order to improve our return per metre squared for every kilogram, litre or kilowatt of inputs we're putting into these high energy systems. A situation-specific calculation of what works best under these conditions can result in some of these small changes having a large accumulative impact on outcomes. In terms of climate mitigation, we need to look more seriously towards infrastructure investment and allocating appropriate resources to future-proofing production systems which are so reliant on limiting factors such as water. There have also been a number of significant reports published on the future of Irish horticulture, and strategies are in place nationally. However, there is still a gap between recommendations made and uptake on the ground. More work needs to be done for this information to not only be disseminated among primary producers, but also to engage them in the process of setting future targets and industry KPIs. Bord Bia, Teagasc, Staffam, all organisations we're very familiar with and all doing vital work to promote the industry. But more still needs to be done to see these findings and recommendations implemented, be that through discussion groups, fiscal or educational supports, or a more combined approach. We still operate within a highly competitive domestic market, but there's still room for an increase in non-technically specific collaboration on bigger picture issues threatening the industry. An increase in communication between industry stakeholders and with our counterparts abroad has the potential to both build resilience within our production environments and technically advance the horticultural industry, particularly within CEA. This would improve our ability to deal with future challenges larger than any individual facility. And finally, to finish, it's not always about huge changes or costly investments. Sometimes it's the nugget of information that you take away from an encounter that can make a big practical difference or inspire changes. A slightly different way of doing something, a minor tweak, a little change to a long-established practice or mindset, the impact of these changes are not to be underestimated. I'd like to conclude by thanking all of Nuffield Ireland's sponsors, my friends, family, everybody who was involved in supporting me behind the scenes. None of this would have been possible without that help and support. Thank you.